a left-wing millennial who rose to prominence during anti-government protests, was elected Chile's next president on Sunday, after a bruising campaign against a free market firebrand likened to former U.S. President Donald Trump. With 56% of the votes, Gabriel Boric, 35, handily defeated by more than 10 points opponent José Antonio Cast, 55, who tried unsuccessfully to scare voters that his young, inexperienced opponent would upend Chile's vaunted record as Latin America's most stable, advanced economy. In a model of democratic civility that broke from the polarizing rhetoric of the campaign, Mr. Cast immediately recognized defeat, tweeting a photo of himself on the phone with his opponent congratulating him on his grand triumph. He then later traveled personally to Mr. Boric's campaign headquarters to meet with his rival. Meanwhile, outgoing President Sebastián Piñera, a conservative billionaire, held a video conference with Mr. Boric to offer his government's full support during the 3-month transition. "I am going to be the president of all Chileans," Mr. Boric said in the brief televised appearance with Mr. Piñera. Advertisement. In Santiago's subway, where a fare hike in 2019 triggered a wave of nationwide protests that exposed the shortcomings of Chile's free market model, young supporters of Mr. Boric jumped and shouted in unison. They headed downtown to join thousands who gathered for the president-elect's victory speech. "This is a historic day," said Boris Soto, a teacher. "We've defeated not only fascism and the right wing but also fear." Mr. Boric's victory is likely to be felt throughout Latin America, where ideological divisions have been on the rise amid the coronavirus pandemic, which reversed a decade of economic gains, exposed long-standing deficiencies in healthcare and deepened inequality that is among the worst in the world. At 35. He was among several activists elected to Congress in 2014 after leading protests for higher quality education. He has vowed to bury the neoliberal economic model left by General Augusto Pinochet's 1973–1990 dictatorship and raise taxes on the super-rich to expand social services, fight inequality and boost protections of the environment. Mr. Cast, who has a history of defending Chile's past military dictatorship, finished ahead of Mr. Boric by 2 points in the first round of voting last month but failed to secure a majority of votes, setting up a head-to-head runoff between the two. Mr. Boric was able to reverse the difference by a larger margin than pre-election opinion polls forecast by expanding beyond his base in the capital, Santiago, and attracting voters in rural areas who do not side with political extremes. An additional 1.2 million Chileans cast ballots on Sunday compared to the first round, raising turnout to nearly 56%, the highest since voting stopped being mandatory in 2012. It's impossible not to be impressed by the historic turnout, the willingness of Cast to concede and congratulate his opponent even before final results were in, and the generous words of President Piñera, said Cynthia Arnson, head of the Latin America program at the Wilson Center in Washington. Chilean democracy won today, for sure. Mr. Cast, 55, a devout Roman Catholic and father of 9, emerged from the far-right fringe after having won less than 8% of the vote in 2017. An admirer of Brazil's far-right President Jair Bolsonaro, he rose steadily in the polls this time with a divisive discourse emphasizing conservative family values and playing on Chileans' fears that a surge in migration, from Haiti and Venezuela, is driving crime. As a lawmaker, he has a record of attacking Chile's LGBTQ community and advocating more restrictive abortion laws. In recent days, both candidates tried to veer toward the center. "I'm not an extremist, I don't feel far-right," Mr. Cast proclaimed in the final stretch, even as he was dogged by revelations that his German-born father had been a card-carrying member of Adolf Hitler's Nazi Party. But while Mr. Cast made a lightning trip to Washington, where he met with Republican Senator Marco Rubio, Mr. Boric sewed together a broader coalition with more traditional leftist parties, added centrist advisors, and promised that any changes would be gradual and fiscally responsible. Mr. Boric's victory is likely to be tempered by a divided Congress. In addition, the political rules could soon change because a newly elected convention is rewriting the country's Pinochet-era constitution. The convention, the nation's most powerful elected institution, could in theory call for new presidential elections when it concludes its work next year and if the new charter is ratified in a plebiscite.